Happy to have you here.
So you want me to just jump in?
Jump on in.
Okay. Well, the Asperger's is the tip of the iceberg. In repeated visits to psychologists, diagnosticians, I've also had ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia added to the list. And that's just on the learning challenges side. Physically, I also have multiple sclerosis and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and a host of other anomalies that make me feel quite sick all the time, and I need a lot of bed rest. But one thing I've learned with all of these different anomalies and quirks is the importance of being resourceful. Using what you have to create the solutions that you need. And one of the things, because I've been presenting since I was 17 years old, and one thing I learned a bunch of years back is that if it doesn't work for you, don't do it. And a lot of my mentors were saying, you got to use PowerPoint, you got to have slides, that's what everybody likes. And although I appreciate that, you might as well be asking a blind man to use slides, because I am so auditory and so not visual that PowerPoints distracted me. I would be frozen. I'd forget my place. And my presentations ended up being clunky and disconnected and full of gaps instead of fluid, like what you're experiencing right now. One of the things that I discovered in the various assessments is, and you all are aware of this, when you're anywhere on the spectrum, there's some areas that you are incredibly good at, and then there's other areas where a 4-year-old could kick your butt. Okay? And in terms of myself, I have verbal abilities that are in the 99.6th percentile. The psychologist assessing me said, you would have been 100%, but you were a little slow on answering one of the questions. So it basically means my verbal abilities blow everybody else away, but that comes with a price. I am unable to plan much of anything. I need someone else to help me do that. As I mentioned before, I can barely do any kind of math. It's very, very difficult for me, so I delegate that to other people. I need help with a lot of things, and I reach out to people to help me kind of put my thoughts together. That includes my books. My books were written in disconnected chunks. They weren't written from first word to last word, smoothly, everything transitioning from one paragraph to the next. There was a lot of patience on behalf of my editors and a lot of red ink. But they helped me kind of embrace the way my brain created, and then I utilize them to help me shape it, mold it into a way that would be easier to digest by other folks. So there's a lot of myths out there about how you must produce your information in order for it to be acceptable to others, and they are all myths. Anybody ever have a conversation where you're talking, but your brain is bouncing all over the place, and you're trying to get to your point, but you hit about 5 others on the way? It's okay to do that without being ashamed. What helps is letting the other person in on what's happening with you. So one of the things that I say often is, hey, just so you know, I'm going to think my way to the answer. So if it seems I'm a little scattered, stick with me, I'll get there. And it's little explanations like that. I call it a social disclaimer. That's in the book of mine that I wrote for parents. It's got a quirky title. It's something like Building Successful Relationships with Individuals on the Autism Spectrum. And then the subtitle is Let's Relate. So if you go and look it up, Brian R. King, Let's Relate, you'll find it. And one thing you may have noticed is that I closed my eyes when I told you that, because I needed to close my eyes to see the book title. I couldn't remember it with my eyes open because my visual abilities are, I swear I don't see the world in as much 3D as I would like, because my visual spatial abilities, how things go together, how things relate in space, I have a hard time figuring out how two simple things go together because I don't see how they connect. So don't ask me to assemble anything. You know, here, honey, can you put this furniture together? Not well, not correctly. Something's going to be backwards or out of order. And I usually need to delegate that to someone else. But if you need me to explain something to you in exquisite, laser-focused detail in a simplified way that no one else has ever been able to explain to you before, that's my jam. But if you want me to do anything else, I'm going to need help or someone else is going to have to do it for me. Okay? Yeah, you can't do math. That's why I have an accountant. That's why I keep all calculations very simple and something I can achieve on a calculator without having to memorize all the directions for using it. Because we know those aren't getting any simpler. So this is at a moment where my brain is freezing, trying to remember what I've already said to figure out where to go from here. But my working memory is in the 3rd percentile, which means I have a gnat's memory.
Why don't I ask you a question then to just kind of keep you going?
Sure.
Well, first of all, where are you physically located? And tell us a little bit about your personal life.
Well, in general, I'm physically located in DeKalb, Illinois, which is a farm town west of Chicago. More specifically, I'm sitting in one of those recliners that automatically lifts the legs and reclines because I often need to change body position throughout the day to manage my pain. And I've got a laptop right in front of me and this wonderfully deceptive background that I found online. So it looks like I'm in a study in front of a bunch of books, but I'm actually practicing a whole lot of self-care.
And are you married or do you have children?
Oh yeah, I'm married for the 2nd time. I've got 3 boys, all of whom have Asperger's and ADHD. My oldest also has dyslexia and bipolar, and the younger 2 have Ehlers-Danlos in addition to the ADHD and Asperger's. And my poor wife, man, she has the executive functioning abilities of a Jedi. She's the one that keeps us organized and on track and manages the schedule and often pulls her hair out because she wishes one day our butterflies would just fly in formation.
You know, Brian, since we have such a small group and people are putting in the chat what their strengths are, why don't we take a minute and you can meet the audience a little bit more and they can tell you what they're good at. So Brian, that is a common issue that Matthew has in terms of knowing what to say and knowing when you're dominating a conversation, maybe even with a topic that people are not interested in. Since you have such a strong verbal ability, has that been an issue for you and how have you bridged that? Or if not,
yes.
Great.
I'm a prolific monologuer. There used to be a time where if you gave me an audience, I would talk your ear off. And I didn't know when somebody was bored. I often needed to have it pointed out to me. In fact, my wife and I have a little code. As when we go to family gatherings and stuff and people ask me questions, I can go off and answer questions they didn't even ask me because I was reminded of those things as I was talking. So the little prompt from her is she'll just gently tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, Brian, I think so-and-so wanted to say something. And the reason that's okay with me is because I asked her to do that. It's not like somebody stepped in and said, hey, man, you might want to give someone else a word in edgewise. Somebody might be upset with that because it was unexpected feedback. But if you tell someone, prompt me this way, it's far more supportive and it distracts you a little bit from your monologue enough to take a break. But there's also a way you can do it for yourself.
And how do you do that for yourself?
One of the things I taught myself to do is to check in for interest. So I'll give myself maybe a minute or 2 of talking, maybe even shorter, maybe a 30-second rule to start with would be easier. And then you pause and you ask, have I answered your question? Or do you have another one? Is there something more specific you would like? Another question you can ask yourself is this interesting to you, or would you like to change the subject?
Do you prompt them to find out, now this is all you talking to someone.
Mm-hmm.
Do you prompt them to find out what they're interested in, or to get them to be participating in the conversation?
Yep. I'll ask them, hey, is there anything that you're just dying to talk about? Or is there anything exciting in your life right now that you'd like to share? As opposed to, hey, what's new? What's going on? You know, that's too big a target. Or something that's going to get you an answer like, fine. How you doing? Fine. That doesn't tell you anything about how the person's doing. But if you ask, what are you excited about? You know, what's cool in your life right now? People love to talk about things that excite them. If you want to ask them, hey, man, anything stink right now? You don't want them talking about that.
Do you, in your mind, you know, when you meet people or interact with people, have a list of those questions that you might ask, or some way to make sure that they're engaged in the conversation?
I usually come up with, I have some ready-made questions, maybe a couple, 2 or 3, because of my working memory. That's all I can remember. I can't remember a list of 10. I can remember a list of a couple. And usually it's a question that will really keep them talking for a while, because I need to have time to kind of settle in and make sure I'm paying attention and practice my, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. So there are questions that you can use to keep a person talking and show that you're interested. Because too often we won't go into a conversation because we don't know what to say. Well, that shouldn't keep you out of it. Don't plan on saying anything. Be a good listener. Keep them talking. I've read in some of my relationship books that there are times where you do all the listening, and afterwards a person leaves and say, man, that person was really interesting. And you didn't say anything, but you were interested in them, so that made you interesting. These books are fake books. It's just a picture. But I do have a digital library in my phone. I switched from hard copy to digital once I learned about the dyslexia. And more importantly, text-to-speech technology. So my devices read to me, because trying to use my eyes is just like trying to walk through wet concrete. I get no motion at all. And I'm glad you asked what I do. I have a master's in social work. I originally did therapy, but now, since 2009, I've been working exclusively like this. I work primarily with women around the world that are neurodivergent themselves or have neurodivergent children. And I teach them how to connect with their kids efficiently so you don't have the arguments and the pushback and the battle of wills, so that you're able to work much more together and help you be less afraid of the way your brain tells you to feel about the world, how to be more confident, how to work with your strengths, as opposed to trying to fit in and make the rest of the world happy, because that just causes exhaustion and more fear.
So Brian, I'm glad you brought up what you do, and we do have some mothers out here. So if you could give us a little window into how you work with mothers, that would be, I think, of interest to folks.
Oh, you bet. I have an online community. I use a platform called Discord. It's a much more organized way to have a conversation, because imagine that you're looking at a piece of paper like you had in grade school with the ruled lines like that. Now imagine each line is a topic. One is anxiety, one's parenting, one is schools, and you have a separate conversation for each line. So it's not like going through a Facebook page where everybody's talking in the same thread and you got to keep track of who's talking about what to who and up. Discord makes it easier, because then you just come in. If you only want to talk about anxiety, you talk about that, and you don't have to pay attention to any of the other channels. So I have women from around the globe. Some are neurodivergent, some have kids, some are both. And 24/7, they pop in there to share wins, ask a question, share a resource with each other. And we discuss it as much as we need to until you have a way forward. Because one of the beauties of that is I can do what I'm doing right now, which is get laser focused on what you need instead of talking about very big abstract concepts that hopefully you can apply to yourself when I'm done talking. I'd much rather show you how to apply it to yourself.
Do you want to give us an example of one of the more typical problems that you hear from the parents or from the mother that might give some folks into your insight?
One of the most common areas of concern is guilt over self-care. I'm supposed to be, moms are supposed to be the servant, the caretakers for everyone in the household. They're supposed to put their needs last, if their needs even make the list. So there's a whole lot of give until the point of exhaustion or having health issues or a headache, and then finally resting and feel guilty about it. For two reasons. You've raised everyone else around you to be entitled because you give, and they're so used to it, they expect it. And secondly, you push yourself to that level because you've been taught that your needs don't matter. Everyone else's needs matter. So one of the things that I need to constantly remind these ladies of and invite them to support each other into is that having your oxygen on first or sleeping. The example I use from my own life is when I was working a full day at my practice, I'd come home exhausted. My oldest would be filled with everything he wanted to tell me from all day long. And he wanted to blurt it all out. And I was not allowed to stop listening until he finished. Well, there was one evening I was too exhausted. I couldn't give any attention. And he wanted to talk to me. I said, I really need to lay down. I just need a nap, and then I'll talk to you. But he was so eager to talk to me, anything less than giving in to him, in his mind, was selfish. So because I wanted to prioritize my needs, he said, you only think about yourself. And he was like 11 or 12 when he said this. He says, you only think about yourself. And I said, no, I also think about myself. And that's the important distinction for moms who feel guilty with self-care. It is not a choice between your needs and everyone else's. It's a choice between your needs and their needs. It's how do you strike the balance as much as possible so everyone's needs are met, so that you create a win-win scenario instead of win-lose. And that's the shift I help the moms make in their thinking, is how does your self-care ultimately provide you with what you need to be an even better servant for those you love? Because trying to water a garden from an empty bucket, I don't care how good your intentions, everything's going to dry out. But I gave my best. Yeah, I gave them everything I had. How much did you have? Not much. Well, maybe we should practice some self-care. Then you have so much more. So that is a very common conversation.
Brian, it's interesting that you picked women to focus on, both neurodiverse women and the mothers of children on the spectrum or other issues, I assume. So why women versus men? What was it that drew you to women?
I've always been very sensitive, emotional, and that appealed much more to girls than the boys, who were all talking about baseball and they were all in little league and playing all kinds of other games that I had no interest in. I was interested in connection, and I'm very artistic. I love to read. I mean, I love to, I do a lot of writing. It's like somebody that needs to draw or someone that needs to sculpt. I need to write. That's also how I think things through best. I either talk my way to it or I write. So the stuff I write has a lot of relationship stuff and emotional stuff. That appeals to women. And also growing up, it was the women that befriended me and took me in when the boys were being bullies. So I learned how to relate like that. And I learned what a good listener I was. I was always intrigued by the way they thought, why they did what they did, why they thought, certain ways. And I began hearing, you're such a good listener. I really like the way you listen. And I also got to learn all of the stuff that women go through at the hands of men. And some of the stuff I heard, it would never occur to me to do because I have very deep empathy for other people. And the more I spent time with women, the more I found I could relate to the feelings of betrayal socially, the trusting people and being let down so often. That was the stuff I dealt with. And what was the cherry on top is when I was a professional, who was making the phone calls to get their kid help? Mom. The dads would rarely show up at sessions. If they did, they didn't want to change. They didn't want to hear it. They weren't interested in doing the work. Mom was the one that was all in. So the one that wants to do the work makes sense to work with.
So Brian, you mentioned bullying, and I know from working with the folks in our organization that bullying is a real problem. Do you want to talk about your experience with bullying and how you got over it?
It was absolutely...
Or have you gotten over it?
It was traumatic. I was subject to people stealing things from me at school. There was one time I was punched in the stomach, another person spit in my hair. People would try and beat me up after school. The name calling was horrible. Some of it came from grade school teachers who thought I was being lazy, dramatic, too emotional, whatever they wanted to throw at me. And there were times where I thought about ending it all. That happened to me a lot because I didn't feel like anyone was on my side. I felt like I was the problem because everybody around me seemed to have a problem with me. And no matter what I did, it wasn't good enough. And what kept me really going throughout those years were every now and then, one person would show up that was so accepting of me, it almost made up for all the rest of the garbage. It could have been one peer. It could have been a peer's parent. It could have been a teacher. But I always had one person that I could hang on to that seemed to get me and see me. And I don't take that for granted because I know not everybody has that. But it was a tremendous blessing for me. And I wouldn't say I've gotten over it because it's still very present to me that there are an awful lot of people in this world that are like that. And because of their own pain, they walk around hurting other people. And they tend to go after the ones that are the most vulnerable and the less skilled at fighting back. And that includes us. Yeah. Oh, there's an easy target. So in retrospect, what I look at now is you've got to have people around you that will help protect you from the bully. Schools could learn a lot more about that. And it's also important to go right to the heart of what the bully is after. And we know that bullies are largely insecure. They have self-confidence issues. So they try and pump themselves up and look better by victimizing someone that they can feel powerful over. So one of the things I encourage is when somebody's bullying you, you ask them, am I a threat to you in some way? Or how am I a threat to you? And they'll say something, oh, you're no threat to me. I could do this, I could do that. And I'll say, okay, because you're being aggressive with me right now. And people are usually only aggressive when they feel threatened. So I just wanted to clarify. So if you're not threatened, is there another way we could talk to each other? Because if you point out very, very quickly what's really going on, it disarms the bully. Because they don't want to be seen for what they are. They want to be seen for how they want to be seen. So you just take that cape off, but you do it in a way where you sound curious instead of like you're making an accusation. curiosity keeps them the expert, so they still get to save face. No,
Well,
it's not that.
That definitely is leveraging your superpower, isn't it?
Oh, heck yeah. I've thought this stuff through.
Yeah, and you're good at the communication, and you can think real time. For some of the folks that I meet, it's not that easy for them to think real time. They may have to go after the fact and think, what happened? You know?
That's where email and texting comes in. Because I've worked with parents where, especially the father and the son, where things escalate quickly because they're so, it's like being disagreed with is kryptonite. You know, if there's any kind of pushback from the son, well, you're not just taking my word for, you're supposed to listen. I'm the father and I'm in charge. And any attempt the son makes at speaking up or self-advocating usually comes out aggressive. So they start butting heads and they stop listening to each other. But when they retreat to opposite parts of the house and start texting, suddenly all of that triggering emotion is out of it. And now they're focused on what they're actually trying to say to one another. So when that happens, things calm down, they come to a better understanding, they talk about how to move forward, and then they try the new plan.
So an alternate form of communication over the verbal if the verbal doesn't work.
Right. My middle son had a significant speech impediment as a child. We really didn't understand him too well until he was around 6. And he still struggles with some pronunciation and putting his thoughts together. But if he's texting you, you would think you are talking to somebody who was scholarly and, you know, more articulate. It's like a totally different person. And that's because his written ability is much better than his spoken. They're different skills. I happen to do both well, but it's important to understand that just because they seem alike because they both involve language, it's expressing that language in a different way. So they're different skills.
Okay. So Brian, when you were talking about the mothers and your motivation for working with the mothers, you mentioned the fathers. And in running our support group, sometimes we have fathers. There are many fathers that are active, but there are some fathers that aren't active where the mother is feeling frustrated by the lack of engagement of the father in helping with the solution. So any advice for them when they're feeling that they're carrying the whole load, or that the father is just not there for their family?
I have a lot to share, but I'm going to boil it down to the essential feature, which is dad's in denial because he believes somewhere that if his child is different in any way, that he has failed. He's failed to produce a normal kid. He's failed to produce a child that he knows how to raise. Because dads have this fantasy, depending on their self-esteem, of creating a mini version of themselves, or of creating a child that's going to succeed in all the ways they didn't. So now you have a child you know is going to struggle in some way, and you believe, okay, my essential goals or desires I have already failed at. And when I look at how to help this child, I don't know what to do. And what is one thing men do not like to do when they don't know what to do?
Ask for directions.
Ta-da! They don't like asking for help. So if they just let you do everything because you're doing a great job, they don't have to admit they don't have a clue. So their pride really stands in the way a lot. And if they are open to learning, they get in their own way because they don't want to admit they're wrong about something. And that wrong word is the issue, because wrong means bad. Wrong means stupid. Wrong means mistaken. So let's swap that word out. Instead of things going wrong, let's say things go different. Different is far more neutral, doesn't trigger you the same way as wrong. So you can reassure him by saying, yeah, things are different than we expected. Yeah, our child's a bit different than the other kids. But we know how to do different. We've been adjusting and being resilient and bouncing forward our whole lives. So this is different. We'll figure out what we need to do when things are different with this. But this is not a new experience. It's just maybe we're being more honest about it, more vocal about it, instead of pretending like we've got it all figured out. So warming him up to the fact that the reality of having a unique child is not a personal failure or personal deficit. It's simply a fact of your life. And you can deal with facts. And you deal with them by embracing things going different, by being curious, as opposed to believing you have to know it all already. That's just kind of tip of the iceberg for how to do it, but there is a way to soften things.
Okay. For our members of the community who are on the spectrum, their social life is a challenge for many in terms of having friends and feeling lonely, or maybe not wanting to have friends and having the right to be alone. So what kind of advice would you give to the individuals who are wanting more friends than they currently have?
One thing, a recent piece of research I read, which was fascinating, it said that the kids who end up making friends in school are the ones who connect with the ones sitting next to them in class. Because you have a better shot with the person that you have closest proximity with. There's less risk because they're already there. You know, it's not like you have to cross a room and introduce yourself and navigate the whole thing. And there's a lot to be said for parallel play as an adult. You know, parallel play is when you play separate activities side by side. You don't really talk to each other. That's a great place to begin. You know, one thing that I see couples doing, I read about it, is, oh, we just like to get together, you know, one night a week and we just read quietly together. I read my book, they read their book, and we're just enjoying each other's space. Because in many cases for us, we get anxious just being with another person. Is that fair to say? Not to mention the pressure of now I need to perform for them. So one thing that can be very helpful is learning to be calm in the presence of another person. And one way to do that is let's just hang out together and enjoy the same activity without having to be tuned in to each other all the time. Let's just learn how to be together first. Because calm is a prerequisite to focus. Because when you're anxious, what is your mind doing? Oh my God, this is terrible. Oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? You catastrophize. But if you're calm, now your brain is much more present. It's much more able to listen because you're not trying to keep yourself from melting down, having a tantrum, freaking out, or fidgeting too much, or whatever it is you're trying to hide. So find ways to just be calm first. Then you can go from there.
Let's take a moment and see if anyone out there has a question or a comment at this point. So it says, my son is an Aspie. He has similar issues with his dad. With me, he opens up. For painful topics, texts me extensively to express himself. My question for you is, how is it best to express love to my son?
One question I'm curious about, and you can ask him this as an aside. You can say, you know what? I was wondering, do you consider yourself lovable? Because if the answer is no, any effort you make to show him love, he's going to think he is not deserving of, and he's going to push back. So another way you can get in that situation is there something your son is really good at that they agree they're good at? So let's say they're really good at drawing. You can ask them, okay, do you really enjoy drawing? Yes. Are there any drawings of yours that you really love? Oh yeah, I really love this drawing. You know, I love it too. And I really love that about you. I love that you are such a good artist and that you enjoy doing what you're good at. I really love that about you. So now you've just gotten them to agree that there's something lovable, or rather him, there's something lovable about him, and he's given you permission to love it too. So that's one way to help him get used to hearing that from you about himself. And then you can move on to ultimately what we want to teach is you are lovable and worthy regardless of how you perform for the world. Even if you make a mistake, you're still lovable. Even if you say the wrong thing socially and someone gets upset with you, you're still lovable. That's where we ultimately want to get them to. So I hope that answered your question, Robin. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that issue of perfectionism that you kind of alluded to is, I think, a struggle for many people. Either a fear of failure that causes a lot of anxiety, or self-flagellation because they see themselves as having failed or made a mistake, or even a life. My son carries some baggage that's back to 6th grade about something that he might not have done as well on that he wanted to do well on, and still beating himself up for that. So have you had struggles with perfectionism, and how what's your self-care strategy for dealing with that?
Yes, I struggle with that. Perfectionism has a couple things behind it. One is the fact that it seems that you only get criticism, that no matter what you do, no matter how much you think you understood what somebody wanted and you try to give it to them, you still make a mistake. So it seems after a while that perfection is the only other alternative to making mistakes all the time. I need to be able to do something that will prevent them from making any criticism in any way because everything is absolutely spot on. Problem is, we never do that. We do what every other human being does, which is we test. We try it out. Let's do this and see what happens. That's where curiosity is a much better tool than wanting it to be right all the time, is be prepared to have something different happen. Another part of the perfectionism is it's a function of the all or nothing thinking that can stymie a lot of us. It's all good or it's all bad. It's perfect or it's garbage. And there's not a lot of room in between. There are extremes. One is perfect and everything we always wanted, but we don't know how to pull it off. Or it's an absolute disaster. Life is over. The sky is falling. The meteor's about to hit the planet. The dinosaurs don't know what hit them. This is worse than that. That's how we tend to think about things. But there's that middle ground, that gray area that makes it difficult for us to see. And I had to work very hard to learn to conceive of the gray area, let alone utilize it. So I needed to change the benchmark. The benchmark meaning, where is the line that tells me I've been successful? And if it's not perfect, what is it? It's imperfect action, which means take action to see what it teaches me. So it might teach me, well, this part works, that part doesn't. Okay, so I need to change the part that doesn't so it works better. There's always that testing, seeing what happens, and making adjustments as you go. That's what the gray area is all for. That's your sandbox. Okay, that's where you do all the play to figure out what is going to work, as opposed to, let me see if this works the right time, the first time, every time, because if it doesn't, I quit. You don't get anywhere if that's your attitude. So learning where it's flexible and where it is safe to be flexible. Because if you decide for yourself it's perfect or nothing at all, you have set yourself up for more disappointment, devastation, and letdown because the standards you have held for yourselves are so high and so unachievable But if you focus on the middle ground, which is a way to take simple actions that don't overwhelm you, I love saying baby steps. Baby steps. As long as you can take action and keep making progress, that's your strategy. It doesn't have to be big moves that leave you very vulnerable and very exposed, because those experiences can be far too devastating.
So this idea of difference, that's a real strong theme for you, and being able to use that word different instead of right and wrong and good and bad and perfect and imperfect.
Yeah, and I just to add to that a little bit, different also means variety. You know, when you look at the animals at a zoo, great variety. When you look at the flowers on a garden or in an open field, even variety, different flowers, different colors, different heights. So if you move from wrong to different to variety, you're getting closer to, hey, this is normal for life. This isn't an exception. People that have a problem with different are the ones that think you can only be safe if everything is the same. If there's nothing unpredictable. Well, that never happens. Just look at the past 3 years. COVID just blew that whole idea of predictability out of the water. Now we better learn flexibility and how to roll with it. So, but you were going to say, Judy?
I want to play a song, but I'll wait a little bit. There's a Randy Newman song called "I'm Different." I don't know if you've ever heard it, but I love that song, and I always think of our group when I hear it. So I'll play it in a little bit. But I wanted to ask a question. So an interesting thing about individuals on the spectrum, or this issue of being different. We're in a phase with our society, this is a very global view, of this trade-off of being accepted for who we are versus adapting to be successful in society.
Oh, I've got an answer to that.
Okay, so it's a common issue. I'll finish the discussion, but I'm really glad you have an answer for that. It's just a common issue because we all want to be accepted for who we are, but say as parents, we see that, yeah, we want to be accepted for who we are, but there's sometimes a cost because you need to fit in to society. So there's a trade-off. Right. So interested to hearing your thoughts on that.
That's, again, moving away from the either or, I meet my needs socially or their needs socially, and moving more towards the win-win. Where's the balance? The both and scenario. One thing that I'm not particularly behind is this whole idea of, I don't need to tune myself down for anybody. I should just be myself. Okay, well, what if you have no indoor voice and you want to say something to the person next to you in the middle of church? Should you be allowed to do that because you're just totally authentic and you shouldn't have to tune it down for anyone? Or would it make sense to learn a little self-discipline, self-awareness, and self-monitoring so that you can adjust your volume when you need to? Is that denying you your authenticity? No, it's not. So it's a matter of understanding what are my needs and what are their needs and what needs to happen for us to respect each other's needs. Case in point, the other night, my son went to a birthday party, my oldest one, and he started getting overloaded. And he was getting fidgety and fretting. Well, the person whose party it was spotted that he was getting overloaded and took him aside and say, hey, man, you know, it looks like it's a little too much for you. Why don't you just step into this room and do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself? What if you were not allowed to show that? What if you just needed to tough it out? Be a joiner. Don't walk away. Anybody been to a family gathering where you try and walk away to get a break and people try to pull you back in? Hey, what are you out here by yourself for? You know, come back to the party. It's important to be able to advocate and say, this is what I need right now. I'll return shortly. Now, help me again, Judy. What was your original question? My working memory just dumped it.
No, it was really about, hold on. It was about managing that trade-off between being yourself and changing yourself to adapt to a social situation, and whether those two are in conflict, or why they may not be in conflict.
I just remembered the bottom line I was going to share. I wish I would have started with this, would have been much more simple. If you're growing a plant, right? Let's say you're growing the juiciest tomato plant you can think of. At every point along its journey of growing into a tomato plant, you can look at it and say, you're doing great. You're perfect just the way you are, because you're doing everything you need to do to be this perfect plant. However, there is some room for growth. You can keep growing until you get to the point where you create these big, juicy tomatoes. So you are both good enough, and you are a work in progress.
Thanks.
I hope that's helpful.
I'm going to share that song. Okay, so let's see. Are there any other questions out there? Did anyone put anything in the chat? Can you discuss about failed relationships?
One thing that's really, really important to understand is when you do or say something in a relationship that's unintentionally hurtful, even to the extent that you meant well, but you said or did something the other person considers unforgivable. Look at those moments as not as character deficits, but as indications of skill gaps. There's something you didn't understand, a rule that you were never made aware of, a skill that, as far as you say this versus that, just the ways there are to navigate a situation smoothly. It's hard enough for somebody who isn't on the spectrum to do that, because communication is imperfect. We make mistakes, there are misunderstandings. But for those of us on the spectrum, even more so because of how much we miss. So if something happens that breaks down a relationship, it's not that you screwed up. You're bad at this. You don't know what you're doing. It's that, well, I seem to have some gaps in my skills. So I need to look at what gap may have caused what happened or contributed to it. There's this quote by Maya Angelou that says, we do the best we can until we know better, then we do better. When you acknowledge that it's possibly a skill gap, and likely is, now you've just opened the door to doing better. You've opened your door to learning something. But if all you're trying to do is protect yourself from being accused of being wrong, mistaken, messed up, another mistake, you can't have that conversation.
So Brian, this is a really important discussion topic, and I'm glad that Jane brought it up. There's a couple things related to this that might be worth exploring a little bit. And well, first of all, this is a common conversation topic for my husband and I about our childhood friends that we lost somehow. And we don't know why. And we may never know why, because that person will not share with us why all of a sudden they ghosted us, per se. So I think there's one aspect of acceptance that is a challenge. And, this whole, if I could go back in time, couldn't I tell myself what not to have done so that this won't happen again? But sometimes you just don't know, and you just have to accept it. Is that something that you've dealt with?
Yeah, I dealt with it constantly. And one thing to understand about other people ghosting you or whatever, more often than not, these are people that are uncomfortable with confrontation. They don't want to have some kind of an argument. They don't want you upset with them. They don't want to feel upset again themselves. So they just run and hide. And when they do that, they're meeting their own needs. It's not about you, it's about them. because they're protecting themselves from feeling uncomfortable, and they think the best way to do that is to, you know, draw that line. Even if you may have realized you made a mistake, are prepared to make up and start over. If a person's just not at that point in their life, they will decide to opt out because their life is bigger than you. It has a lot more going on than the relationship with you. So you don't know that their choice is always about you. It could just be other things.
And that's a good point. I think one of my favorite movies is a movie called Sliding Doors. I don't know if you ever saw it.
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it.
Okay, it's a great little film, and it takes place in England, and it's with Gwyneth Paltrow, and she plays this individual who misses the tube, misses a train, and you see two different versions of her life, one where she caught the train and one where she misses the train.
That's fascinating.
And how her whole life, the trajectory of her life changes. And as you watch the movie, you think, oh, it's good that she made the train, or that it's good that she missed the train because of what happens in her life. And it's really not until the end that you realize which one was the lucky version of the life. But I think life is like that. And sometimes when we mourn a relationship ending or a situation ending, we fail to see the train that we caught and how that situation ended up making our life better. Maybe you lost a friend, but maybe you ended up making another friend because of that ended up changing your life. Maybe you lost a friend, but maybe you went on a trip or did something that changed your life. So it's so easy to mourn the things that we lost and not realize that maybe we should be celebrating what happens instead.
Well, and one of our major mistakes when it comes to life is that we believe things are supposed to stay. We can't even get the sun to last 24 hours. It's up for half the time and then it goes away. We can't get, well, you guys are in California, so you get, year-long spring and summer. I live in the Midwest, so we get the cold and bitter. But all of it's temporary, and that includes our relationship. My mom just passed away in April. I knew, as much as I'd like to have her counsel for the rest of my life, I know that's not going to happen. So when it comes to relationships, you not only expect them to change over time, but you expect that they're going to last forever. And one of the reasons we have such a hard time letting go is because we attach our worth to someone else accepting us. So if this person accepted us for a while, they no longer do, that means they've rejected us, because you think as all or nothing thinkers. I'm either all in and they love me and we're best friends forever. We might even get married, but then they don't talk to me anymore. They hate me. They reject me. They no longer care for me. As long as that's your dialogue, it's going to be very, very hard. But if you understand relationships as things that you experience for a while, have the opportunity to learn and grow from, and that's their purpose. To have that experience for the time it lasts, to learn and grow from it and become a better human being. The purpose of a relationship is not to hold on to that person for as long as humanly possible and make them never leave. So those are some things to consider.
Very, very good point. We have about 14 more minutes. So if anyone else has a question for Brian.
The first wife, I swear, is on the spectrum, even though she denies it. It was like that, the people that meet sitting next to each other in class, we were both working at a hospital, and my job meant I needed to go into her part of the hospital, and I saw her every day. And I developed a crush on her. Then I wanted to talk to her, but I didn't know how to talk to her. Then something happened that made it necessary for me to talk to her in order to do my job. So I look for opportunities where I didn't have to create a potentially awkward situation. Like, well, excuse me, I just wanted to say hi. I know I'm a complete stranger and you don't know me. Those are harder to do, those blind approaches. But if you try and find a way to make it like, of course I would talk to you. You know, you can manufacture needing to ask for directions to somewhere when you know how to get there, just so you have a chance to talk to her. So manufacture reasons to walk up and say hi. That's how I met the first one. The second one, I kind of cheated. I've noticed this, we were 4 years old. But we went to school through 6th grade. Then we went our separate ways and I lost track of it for 37 years. Then when my first marriage fell apart, I went on Facebook to try and, meet new people. And I didn't talk to anybody. I was socially isolated. So I thought about, who do I want to touch base with? Who am I curious about how they turned out? And hers was one of the first names I thought of. So I looked her up. She accepted my request. And her claim is that her profile was only live for 2 hours. And that I was the first request that she accepted. Women tend to be much more empathetic. They tend to be better at faking social competence because they can mirror really well. They can copy the people around the behavior much better. Whereas guys are really, really in their heads. And they're thinking about what I want to accomplish, what I want to talk about, what I need, and it's very transactional. So those are one of the biggest distinctions. And you'll see them socializing differently. Guys will be much more inclined to say, no, I'm fine, leave me alone, I want to do my own thing. Where girls will try harder to be included. Sarcasm, and this is my personal belief, sarcasm is aggressive. Because when you're sarcastic to someone else, it's usually it's a hidden criticism. Hey, that was real smart, and you roll your eyes. Criticism isn't a quick way to connect with someone else. It's a quick way to keep them defensive so you can feel like the smarter one. And I think that's a big part of American culture because of capitalism, where you're always competing with one another. So one way, instead of trying to become an expert at sarcasm yourself, I still have difficulty telling whether someone's joking with me or not, or whether they're being sarcastic. So I'll just ask them, do you mean that? Is that how you meant to say that? And I ask it with curiosity and I'm clarifying. That's how you handle the sarcasm. As far as the sense of humor goes, it's important to change how you view yourself and how you're moving through your life. If you think this is a dance and I'm going to be tripping over myself on occasion and I can giggle when I trip. Case in point, because of my physical disabilities, I can't walk straight. I have a hard time standing for more than 10 or 15 minutes. I bump into stationary objects that have always been there. So when I do that, especially if it's in public, like a restaurant, and I notice people looking at me, I can be embarrassed because I made a mistake, or I can say, yes, ladies and gentlemen, that's how that's done. If you ever want to bash into a pole, follow my lead. So you turn it into a joke. So you're laughing with them instead of being concerned that they're laughing at you. I get silly sometimes when I lose track of how I'm talking. I forget my place. I'm like, oh, there you go again. Yet my brain just glitched. What was I talking about again? And I do it playfully as opposed to, I'm so sorry. I was afraid this would happen, that I'd get anxious and I wouldn't think straight. You see the difference? Just that difference in approach totally changes the energy around what happened. Right. Then it's much easier to look at yourself with a less serious lens. Group as it exists now is for women, of course, because that's who I work with. Another group, if there are enough men that are interested. A link in there, I'll tell you what, I'll put my email in the chat as well. Saying, hey, I'd be interested in another Discord group or a Facebook group or something like that. And as I said, enough people are interested, we'll make it happen. Are these feelings that you're having constant or situational? Yourself, because you can't do anything unless you know what you're working with. It's like if someone says, I broke something, can you fix it? Well, what is the thing that's broke? Well, I don't know. Is it a car? Is it a bicycle? So being specific is important. One thing I understand about anxiety and depression is, and I experience both as well, is it sensory? You know, are your needs not met? You know, is your environment too bright, too noisy? Are there a lot of other things happening that just stress you out? We need to define what success is. And if success, in your definition, involves a lot of comparison, you're probably going to set yourself up for failure. Because if success is, well, I'm going to be like this person or that person or that person. No, success means your needs are met and you are able to make a contribution according to what your gifts are, so that you feel like I'm making a difference here. So a lot of it is about dispensing with what's typical or what everybody else is doing and figuring out what's the best fit between me and the world. And that's a process. You don't have to meet someone else's approval, which is what we're typically taught. Unless they tell me I'm a winner and I'm successful, I'm not allowed to feel like that yet, and I'm not to feel happy. So I want to encourage you to dispense with that.
So Brian, thank you so very much. Do you want have any parting words you'd like to share with the group?
Well, one thing to Aaron, when you look at our minds, we think in a series of tangents. We don't think linearly. So allow yourself the privilege of going off in different places, because that's what your brain does. That's how it makes connections and makes sense of things. If that's disorienting to others, enlist them to support you. I've done it with Judy a couple of times where I said, I forgot what I was talking about. Or could you tell me what the original question was? Because that's how I find my way back when I've wandered off too many different directions. And then you can pick up kind of where you left off. But the more you wrestle with your own mind, the harder it's going to be to collect your thoughts and get them out there. And in a situation like this, you see that the rest of the world looks like they're different and we look normal. But when you spend your life comparing yourself to everyone who is not on the spectrum, you're always going to feel like you're screwing it up. Themes of our conversation here has been, it's not a matter of trying to figure out, not how to turn yourself into a one-size-fits-all, where the skills that you use are the same skills you use with everybody. That doesn't happen. It's important to find the middle ground, like what's going to work for us, not just, I need to learn all of these different ways to mask my characteristics or pretend like I'm normal so that I can meet everyone else's needs. Okay, well, you also need to meet your own. So how do we do us? That's what you need to figure out when you're building a relationship with someone else. How do we do us as opposed to how do I do everybody? So making it much more specific like that really can shrink your learning curve, because you're not trying to find something that's going to work every time with everybody. And too often when we are socialized, we're taught to think that's how it actually works. You know, in social skills groups, when one person says this is how you're supposed to respond. Always? No, not always. So in your case, and for anyone, look for people that are curious about getting to know you. People that are curious about getting to know you are going to be a lot more easy to negotiate with than someone who is very extroverted, wants to be in control of everything, and thinks they know it all already.